Hello everybody and welcome to this first tutorial video. Today I'll be running you through how to start up, stop, perform passenger procedures and freight procedures on all 6 base game trains in Train Sim World 2. To start, let's get familiar with the 1972 stock used on the Bakerloo line. We are here at Elephant and Castle, and we're just going to drive from here to Lambeth North, demonstrating all appropriate procedures. The first thing to do to set up the train is to go down to the bottom left of the driver's seat to the control key. You want to insert this and switch it to on. Next, we want to insert the direction selector key and move it to the forward position. Next, we want to turn the headlights to on, which they should be on automatically. You can also turn the saloon lighting and heat and vent set. This will turn the passenger lights on. Next, unlock the doors on the right hand side, or if the platform is on the left hand side. We will wait for the passenger loading procedure to complete, as demonstrated in the top left corner of the HUD. Now the passenger loading procedure has finished, we can lock the doors. Now we will move the master controller into the off and release position. We will now press Q, or this button there, to reset the audible warning valve reset. This will enable the train to move. Next, move the master controller into the power range using either shunt, series, or parallel to get moving, making sure to obey all the appropriate speed limits. The 1972 stock has very high performance acceleration and very high performance braking, as you would expect from a metro type train. However, do not use this to your advantage if you're not super familiar with the train. It's always better to brake early and glide in slowly into a platform than to brake too late and overrun. As you can see, the line has now cleared up to 15 miles an hour as demonstrated by the red needle on the HUD. The 1972 stock has 2 brakes. If I turn the cab lights on, we can have a look. There is the rheostatic electro-pneumatic brake, which is the brake I recommend you use, and we can see in this region here, with lap and service apply, we have a Westinghouse brake. This Westinghouse brake is a little bit more finicky to use and requires additional skill, so that's the reason why I recommend you use the electro-pneumatic brake. On the approach to Lambeth North, we will use the electro-pneumatic brake. Beware of the steep gradients that can be found on this line when accelerating and decelerating. Steep gradients can generally be found on the approach to all station platforms to assist with deceleration, and also leading away from all station platforms to assist with acceleration. However, this is not always present, as seen here at Lambeth North. I'm going to start applying a small amount of brake force, and as you can see, we're going to slide into the platform very slowly so that we can stop in the correct position. The platforms are exactly the same length as the train, so there's not much margin for error. We have now stopped at the correct position of the platform, and we can now open the doors to proceed with the passenger operations. This concludes the basic operations of driving the London Underground 1972 stock train. We are now on Köln-Aachen, the route between Cologne and Aachen, in the Deutschbahn Class 442 Talent 2 electric multiple unit. I will now demonstrate how to get this unit moving with the raised pantograph and circuit breaker already closed, as can be found in most scenarios and all timetabled services. To start, we can find that the master switch is already in the on position. However, if it is not, simply click on master switch to insert the key and move it to the on position. Next, we have the reverser. We will move this to the forwards position. Next, we proceed with the passenger operations, opening the doors on the right hand side, as this case the platform is on the right. We can now appropriately set the headlights to high beam, and over here this is our throttle indicator. The brake over here is the indirect brake. It should already be in the release position when you join into the scenario. I recommend not using this brake as it overcomplicates things. Instead, I prefer to use the combined throttle brake handle. Over here, I will give you a brief rundown of the pantograph and main circuit breaker. The first thing you want to do is raise the pantograph like this. Then you want to close the circuit breaker like this. Before doing that, however, you should always engage the battery, which is this switch here, and hold it in the on position for 5 seconds. Passenger operations are now complete, so we will lock the doors. The doors are now locked, so we can apply power incrementally with the combined power brake handle. To accelerate faster, simply add more power to the power brake handle. The power brake handle is nice because it allows complete control over the amount of power used by yourself. This is the same for the brakes, which have up to 100% and anywhere in between. Having reached line speed, added a touch of brakes there just to bring the speed of the train down within reasonable limits, and we will drive to the first station. This train also features a cruise control called the tempomat. If we press this whilst power is applied, say 5%, it will hold to the nearest 5 km/h mark, in this case 35. However, we can now use this tempomat increase-decrease to set it to the set line speed, which in this case will be 60. Regardless of your throttle input, the tempomat uses full power whenever it's used. You cannot use the tempomat when the train is in the when the train throttle, is in the off position, or is in the braking range. However, you can use the tempomat to brake by simply reducing its speed below that you are currently operating, like this. You can release the tempomat as well by just pressing the off button. We'll now raise the tempomat speed up to 80 km/h, the current line speed. I will now raise the tempomat to 100 km/h. I'm not going to raise it to the full 140 because we have a stop coming up. I'll now start to apply a small amount of brake to bring us down to an appropriate speed. Now going full brake on the entrance to the platform and then releasing it gradually. Do not apply the brakes too late, as with the Bakerloo line. However, this train does brake very well. Now fully release the brake to ensure that the last carriage of the train is in the platform. Now applying the rest of the brakes to bring the train to a stop. You'll now unlock the doors on the left-hand side. When starting the train up again, the temper mat has switched itself off, so you'll need to turn this back on. As you can see, because we are not in a power range, pressing the temper mat on button will do nothing, and the temper mat increase/decrease is inactive. This concludes the basic operation of the Talent 2 electric multiple unit. We are now in the ICE3 high-speed electrical multiple unit found on the Cologne-Aachen route. We will go through a basic procedures of passenger operations at Cologne, and then we will introduce the LZB signalling system and basic operations. Let's begin. This train is arguably simpler to drive. To unlock the control desk, we must first put the reverser into the forward position. Then, using the door control, we will turn this to open right, close left. This has now unlocked the right-hand side doors. We will now raise the pantograph and close the main circuit breaker. As you can see, the train is now drawing current from the overhead wires. You can also tell this from the noise. Coming down onto the right-hand side of the driver's cab, we have a cupboard. Open this and find the LZB isolation switch. Turn this to on. There should now be a blue B on the HUD. The blue B can also be found on the driver's desk here. To turn the AFB on, which is a cruise control system used on most German trains, we press function 9 on the integrated display, followed by V soll Freigabe, and after 3 tones of AFB said by the voice, we can now press Grundbild. The AFB cruise control system is now controlled by the AFB lever. We can now close the doors and set the AFB to the current line speed, which is 40 km per hour. The doors are now locked, so making sure the train brake is in release, that's this, we can start to apply a small amount of power. I recommend about 30% to get moving. At the moment, we are driving the train manually. However, once we pass this area, roughly, on this end of the map, and this area, roughly, on the Aachen side of the map, the LZB system will turn on. As this section is the 250 km/h section, it exceeds the 160 km/h line side signalling restriction. All railways in Germany that exceed a line speed of 160 km/h must use LZB or an equivalent in-cab safety system. On this section of the line, the maximum speed is only 160 km/h, and you can tell this by its wavy nature. For this reason, LZB is not active on this part, and LZB is also not active at the Cologne immediate station because of the complex junctions and also its lack of high speed. We can now start to apply a tiny bit more power, taking it up to 60%, and we'll raise the AFB to 60 km/h. The AFB on this train, unlike most German trains, is in 10 km/h speed increments. If, for example, you were going through a train wash, however, and you wanted to use a speed of 5 kilometers an hour, 2 kilometers an hour, 10 kilometers an hour, or 25 kilometers an hour, you can use the set speed on the integrated display. These do not use the AFB lever, instead using their own system. The 2 kilometer an hour unit is particularly useful, as I said, when going through car washes. We will now increase the AFB to 80 kilometers an hour. Somewhere along this area, as we are approaching LZB territory, there will be a sign on the right hand side that says LZB, and here it is. There will also be a cable running along the inside of the track, and here it is as well. This will be accompanied by a beep in the driver's cab. We are now in LZB automatic signalling, and thus we can raise the AFB lever to full, that means 330 kilometers an hour, and the throttle to full power. This display in the centre of the train has also lit up, and now we have a bug on the speed display. This indicator here tells us how long until the next speed restriction. In this case, it is greater than 9.9 kilometers away. This is in meters. Getting into shorter distances, this 7-segment display will turn off and this linear display will engage. However, because over 9.9 kilometers is obviously greater than 4 kilometers, we use both displays. When we get to a speed reduction, we can see that this linear display will gradually reduce. However, there is nothing that you need to do on your part, as we can just see the red bug moved up to 140 kilometers an hour in coalition with the rising speed limit. In other words, when LZB and AFB are used in conjunction, the train effectively drives itself, accelerating and braking to the line speed and also to signals. That means that if there is a train stuck ahead of you at a slower speed, the train will automatically balance its own speed without any need for you to intervene. It will also automatically obey speed limits. As we can see here, we've just passed a 160 km an hour limit, and we should be able to see the red bug and the HUD increase automatically as we've just seen. To slow the train, simply use the train brake, or you could use the AFB lever. It is, however, particularly tricky to stop the train once leaving, not to stop the train, but to continue driving once leaving the LZB zone at Aachen. I will now demonstrate how to turn the AFB back on after leaving the LZB area. When approaching the end of an LZB area, obviously we're not, but I'm just going to simulate, find the PZB acknowledge lever and push this forward. You will hear a voiceover in the cab. The flashing end should now stay solid and lit. I'm now going to turn the LZB system off, and you can notice that the train is no longer drawing or applying power. The throttle, however, is still set to maximum. What we're going to do is turn this off and leave it there for a few seconds. We will also move the AFB lever to 0 and then back to 160. We can now start to apply power again. And just to show you how it works, we can also reduce speed using the AFB. Again, braking the train does not require use of the power. However, unlike the tempomat, if we raise the AFB, the train will not accelerate up to that speed. If we stick to a minimum amount of power, it will only apply that minimum amount of power. However, if we go full power, it will raise itself, automatically turning the power off when it reaches the set speed. I will now slow the train using the train brake, applying a small amount of brake force to start off with, and then gradually increasing through brakes 1A, 1B, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and full application. There is also an emergency brake setting. The emergency brake can be found here as well. This concludes the basic operations of driving the ICE3 high-speed electric multiple unit. Welcome to CSX Transportation's Sandpatch Grade, a bustling freight corridor in the Allegheny Mountains. You will start by learning how to start, stop, couple and switch in the SD40-2 locomotive. This locomotive is very complex and requires a complex understanding of the controls. To start the setup of this locomotive, we will turn the generator field to on. We will then turn the headlights to bright. We will then insert the reverser handle and move it to the forwards position. We will then get the cutoff valve and turn it to freight. You should hear a brake whooshing sound. We'll then get the MU2A valve and set it to lead or dead. We can now start to release the brakes. First, the automatic brake, setting it to release, and then the independent brake, setting it to bail off. You can now hear all of the brakes getting released from the engine. Next, we need to set up the banking con by simply turning it on. Now, when we apply power in the front cab, the other locomotive will also have power applied. We can now start to apply power. As you can see, we are now moving. However, these long and heavy freight trains accelerate very slowly and require quite a lot of power to get moving. It is not recommended to slam the locomotives into full power immediately, as this can damage the locomotives in real life. Obviously, this isn't simulated, so if you're looking for a less authentic and easier to drive experience, you can always take this option. Also, with these very long trains, slack action is quite a common occurrence. This occurs when the individual couplers, as seen here, bend backwards and forwards, which means that it is similar to taking up the slack in a rope. This means that you can start by accelerating very quickly and then almost get bounced back. If starting the train on a very steep uphill slope, it is required to apply a small amount of independent brake and also keep the power within the green zone as seen here. I also personally recommend using the lead axle sand by turning it on here. I would not recommend using the main sanding, as you need to hold it down and that can be quite tedious. We will now learn how to stop the train. To maintain a speed whilst going downhill, we can use the dynamic brake. As seen here on this plate, we must not use the dynamic brake until the train has been in idle for 10 seconds. We can now put the train into setup. And now we can start to apply a certain amount of dynamic brake. This puts the traction motors into reverse, more or less, and starts to brake the train to hold the speed. However, it will not bring the train to a complete halt. As seen, if we apply full dynamic brake, we can see engines revving and the ampage inclining a lot. However, they start to drop off at lower speeds. And in fact, we are accelerating. This is because below 10 miles an hour, the dynamic brake is more or less useless. We will now release the dynamic brake. The independent brake, as you can see, that brief short spurt of deceleration was caused by slack action. The independent brake applies brakes to the locomotives in a consist. If we put this even to full application, you can see the train brakes, but not so fast. This is the only brake with a bail off function. This quickly releases all of the brakes. The automatic brake applies the brakes over the entire length of the train. If we put this into initial reduction, you can see the train brakes very fast. However, only use this brake when you're actually trying to stop the train. If we put this into full service and then suppression, we can see the train stops fairly quickly. To uncouple carriages from a consist, if we choose these carriages, it is not necessary to leave the cab. Instead, one can just use free cam and fly over to the designated area. We can see here that there is a coupler bar. However, do not use this when you're trying to couple up to a set of carriages. This only uncouples trains, as you can see now. These have uncoupled. To couple them back up, we simply hover next to them and click. However, as these are automatic knuckle couplers, all we need to do is reverse up. I'm not going to show you how to do that, it is fairly simple. However, with some carriages it might require a little bit of coaxing. Do not try to couple carriages at speeds exceeding 3 miles an hour and apply the brakes immediately after coupling. To switch points in Cumberland Yard and elsewhere, simply either use free cam, walk, or use the map and just click on switch lever. You can do this in the map by finding some points using these triangle symbols and just clicking on them. You can now see the highlighted zone switches. This concludes basic operations of the SD40-2 locomotive. We are now in the general purpose or GP38-2 locomotive, and we will show you how to start up and get moving. We will not cover basic freight operations as these were covered in the SD40-2. As you can see, the cab of this locomotive is fairly similar to the SD40-2 with some minor differences such as a digital speed display and some different colours and materials used on the control stand. However, the basic principles are the same. We'll start by turning the generator field to on. Then turn the headlights to bright. Insert the reverser handle and put it to the forward position. Next, using the cutout valve, we turn it to freight, and the MU to a valve to lead or dead. We will now bail all the air off the independent brake until this indication reaches 0 and then climbs back up to 30, and then bail all of the air off the automatic brakes, releasing as required. We can now start to apply a small amount of power as required. The GP38 is used for smaller trains, such as this. As we can see in the map, this is quite a small train compared to other longer trains on this line. This is because the GP38 has a lower power output to other locomotives. You can see this as the train struggles to get moving, even with quite small loads. For this reason, it is often used for shunting procedures in Cumberland Yard. Now we can see the train is starting to move. So yes, the GP38 can be found in several different uses. Most of them, as we can see over here, this pair of GP38s, used for shunting procedures, as well as this one. They are often used shunting in pairs, However, a few small amounts of these locomotives can be seen hauling mainline freight such as this. To slow the train, there are three options as in the last SD40-2. The dynamic brake, the independent brake, and the automatic brake. We will stop the train using the automatic brake. Overall, the SD40 and the SD40, and the GP38 are very similar trains to drive, with a few minor differences that must be bared in mind. We will now move on to the final train in the base game, the AC4400CW. We are now going to look at the final train for this video, the AC4400CW. This train features a much more modern cab design from the last two trains, and also, unlike the SD40 seen on our right hand side and our left hand side, it has a wide cab design. This doesn't actually mean that the cab is any wider, but as you can see, the front nose on the SD40 that I'm circling with my mouse is narrower, allowing for access along the side. However, the AC4400, as well as the other train of this type in the game, the C40-8, have wide noses, meaning that to enter the train, one must use the middle staircase and the two doors. Variants of this train do exist with the narrower nose, however they do not feature in this game. To start off with, we will first put the reverser into the forwards position. We will now come over to this control panel down this end and turn generator field to on. Returning to this integrated function display, not this one, using IFD digit 1, we will turn the auto brake to cut in and the independent brake to lead. We will now save changes and exit. Returning to the main desk, we can turn the headlights to bright auxiliary and release the brakes. We can now apply the power. This train is the most powerful of all of them. As you can see, it wastes no time in accelerating. Also, these trains can be found hauling much heavier services requiring up to 4 locomotives. It is not necessary to use banking com on this train, even though it is available. As with the previous trains, there are 3 brake options. On the brake stand over here, we have the independent brake in black, the automatic brake in red, but we also have the combined dynamic brake intermixed with the power handle. To use this, simply push it further back, and then it will enter the setup position, and then into the braking range. To return to the power, simply move it to the power range. We will stop the train with the automatic brake. This train can stop fairly quickly for a heavy freight train. Thank you for watching this brief introduction to the base game trains. I hope this has been beneficial to all those who have watched. If you would like to see any more in-depth tutorials for any other routes or locomotives, please let me know. As always, please make sure to like and subscribe if you did enjoy the video.